Hi, and welcome to the Handbag Designer 101 podcast with your host, Emily Blumenthal, handbag designer expert and handbag fairy godmother, where we cover everything about handbags from making, marketing, designing, and talking to handbag designers and industry experts about what it takes to make a successful handbag. Welcome, Amber Katz, to Handbag Designer 101, the podcast. I'm very excited to have you here today. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I think I'm happier. So, so we recently connected because you were doing a handbag story and we connected and I provided you with some unique information. I believe it was about the belt bag, bum bag.
Yes.
And all of that. Crossbodies and all that. And I was excited to meet you and then saw your wealth of work and how you've been writing for 100 million publications. It seems like for 100 million years. And I think hearing the angle of someone who writes and covers content and being on the receiving end and what you look for, I thought it was really important to have someone like you, specifically you, come in and talk about the process and everything in terms of how you want to be pitched and all those things you look for. So, I've just basically cut you off. Thank you. Welcome, Amber.
No, it's fine. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah. So should we start? Where should we start?
So I'd love to start, where you went to college. Was writing always something that was interesting? Was fashion always something you followed? Like, how did those two worlds collide?
Yeah. So I went to Boston University. And I always wanted to work for a magazine, write for magazines. That was always what I wanted to do. But actually, it's funny. In college, I was in I was going to be a journalism major. And weirdly, there was this kind of derailment. There's actually a hurricane at the beginning of, once I declared my major, I think sophomore year. And the class got canceled and we had to, we didn't learn how to do our first assignment, which was a news story. And the class got canceled, so we had to write it. I had to write it without, learning how to write a news story. So, of course, it was full of opinions. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'd scheduled office hours with my professor. This is such a random tale. And she actually stood me up for the office hour. So I wrote it, without understanding what was going on. And she gave me an F, which I'd never gotten in. Because again, it was full of opinions and, it wasn't.
We could do a whole episode on that alone.
Yeah,
Had you ever gotten an F on anything before?
Never in my life. So I was so put off by this. And in retrospect, I maybe, could have handled it differently. I just withdrew from the class, changed my major. And I feel it was sort of a blessing in disguise. Not that I don't, I love journalism, but I never wound up actually, studying it for a degree. I've taken journalism classes actually a la carte once I graduated, once I moved to New York. I took some NYU classes, some new school classes. So I actually did sort of get a little bit of a professional education in it, but not toward my degree. So anyway, I wound up switching my major. I wound up majoring in French language and literature.
Oh, I was a Russian Spanish major. I see you, girl.
Out.
I see you.
Love it.
Yes.
No, it's a great jumping off point for many things. And, it's like majoring in English with the added complexity of reading your books in French, writing about them in French, and speaking about them in French. So it's much harder, but you learn the same skills, but it's kind of dialed up. So anyway, I wound up majoring in French. I also thought I wanted to go to law school, a thing that never happened. So I had internships in law. Anyway, the bottom line is I never had internships for magazines. So it was really difficult. I was not able to get a job, out of school in magazines. I wound up falling into a career of financial copywriting and editing, actually.
Well, I'm sure that paid. So
yeah, kind of. I didn't work for an investment bank, but I worked for these places. It paid better than magazines, certainly.
Right.
And then I started a beauty blog in 2006. I was one of the first beauty bloggers.
Oh, and there it is. And what was it called?
And I was able to pivot from there. So it was originally called Beauty Blogging Junkie, which is the stupidest name. I changed it to Rouge 18, which it was named after a Pantone shade. And then, I had that blog for many years. I actually discontinued it maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And now I have a Substack, which is sort of an updated version of the blog, which is called Things I Buy as a Civilian. So that's the very long story of how we got here. So now I do a combination of writing for various publications, including Time Magazine has a commerce site called Time Stamped, kind of like their Wirecutter. I write for them. AP has the same thing. It's called AP Byline. I write for them. And then I do brand copywriting for brands, across the spectrum, from beauty brands to, Kind Snacks, Estee Lauder, leather goods brands. It runs the gamut.
Right. Oh my God, so much to cover here. So, and number one, I want to apologize because both of my ring lights have just died. I had one and I had like a mini backup. So if anybody who watches this on YouTube, you can only see half of me. So I'm
in the same. Yeah. I'm like the Phantom of the Opera. I don't even have one up here. I forgot mine totally. So you're seeing the one on YouTube.
I know the one I had just died. And then I bought like a pocket one because, who isn't up at 1 a.m. on Instagram? And it's like, oh, I guess I need this too. Well, it lasted for all of 6 minutes. So anyway, I'm sorry. But yeah, the early blogging, it's funny because I found that anybody who was an early adopter to blogging, I had a site that was the origin of Handbag Designer 101.
Oh, really?
That came out in 2006. Yeah, I closed it, I want to say 2017. It was one of those things. Yeah. It was ongoing and it was so much work. But honestly, it's a marathon to know how to, writing was something I never thought I would be doing. But then it's like you don't realize that everything you do, especially when you're presenting your own brand, you have to be a craftsman in terms of your words to get the point across as quickly as possible. And as effectively as possible, especially when it comes to a fashion brand.
Yeah.
So why beauty? And were you, excited to start getting free product? Was that the end goal? And how did that work?
Yeah. So I always loved beauty. I was always like, I started babysitting solely because like my parents were like not giving me the money for beauty products that I needed. I was like very entrepreneurial. I was like, I will make my own money for beauty products. So I've always been very into it. I was like buying masks and lipstick and all kinds of things from the time I was like 7, 8 or something. So I was always...
Your skin looks beautiful. So whatever you did at 7, it's worked. It's held over.
Thank you. So, and I love fashion too. I love fashion and beauty, but mostly, yeah, I was more consumed with beauty. And when I started the blog, I'm sure as a person who also started a blog in 2006, people were not getting free things really in 2006. A couple of years later, I was listed in like a top 10 list of the new, of blogs by Women's Wear Daily. And then I started getting free stuff. Like the industry sort of started to catch on in 2008. But in 2006, I was just like, I thought my mother would read this blog and like maybe that would be it. I did it because it was mostly for me. Like I was working at an accounting firm, which was so not a fit. And I was doing marketing and writing. So that was somewhat of a fit. But like, I didn't like it. I was talking to partners, like men in their 50s about my favorite lipstick. And obviously that was not the best audience for that. So I started the blog actually just like as an appropriate place to talk about the products I love. And then it wound up leading to, a pivot in my career and a lot of, freebies, which was fantastic. But, I bought it. I was buying my own stuff in the beginning and just reviewing everything I was buying at like TJ Maxx and the Lancome counter. So
how long did you do it before you realized you could do it full time?
That's interesting. So yeah, I did the blog. I had a full-time job and wrote the blog for 4 years. And then I quit my full-time job, but I always freelanced as well. Like I always did the copywriting. I never actually, because I just don't believe in a single source of income.
I agree.
Forget it. So I always did other things, but there were a few years where I would say that the blog was like maybe 80% of my income.
So that must have been hard to do, to say, okay, my writing is my power, which is my income. That's a lot of pressure to put on somebody.
It is, but it was great. I loved it. It was a very different time. I used to go to events for, fashion and beauty launches, like almost like 4 or 5 nights a week. And it was great. I would eat hors d'oeuvres for dinner. And I got to know a lot of people in the industry. And it was really fantastic. And I have to say, like a lot of these publicists who I met and, people from brands, brand founders, a lot of them are my copywriting clients now. So like all of that work and networking for so many years, while it was kind of exhausting and I'm an introvert, so it was like a little bit difficult for me. I made a lot of friends and I met a lot of people I like, but just the pace of it became, exhausting. But I think it was, well worth it because it established like a great network of so many people who I'm in contact with to this day. And this was, 15 to 20 years ago.
I think that brings up a good point, that don't underestimate networking, because I honestly, at that same time, and I wish those kinds of events still existed because I would still go out for them, but especially in this day and age. It's so hard to find like-minded people within the beauty and fashion industry that don't have an aggressive agenda to meet and connect and, that aren't shooting video of themselves while you're there in order to have a conversation until they're looking over your shoulder for someone else.
It's funny you say that. Yeah, I have to say, like, nothing against influencers. They work very hard, but the rise of that sort of, I was also like in my late 30s by the end of this cycle. So I was just kind of not up to, being out every single night, from like 5 until like 9 p.m. But it just shifted, the whole focus became about the photography and what you can put on Instagram. And it was just sort of expected. And, the whole landscape shifted, as you said. So it just sort of became less fun for me as a person who, I have an Instagram, but I was never really like an influencer. So yeah, it just changed.
You brought up a good point about Instagram and obviously the advent of social media. How has that impacted not even so much you as a brand, but the people you cover and the brands that you look for?
It's interesting. I think for a while, everything had to be like pristine and beautiful and stunningly shot. And it was all about that. And now, I don't know, I think we're seeing a shift back toward good writing. The images still matter and the item still matters, of course. Like things need to be beautifully packaged, beautifully designed, all of that. That's never, not going to be the case. But, things are a little bit more real, I think. Like, Substack has become sort of, it's taken over some of the market share, I think, of Instagram. Not that people are still on Instagram, but it's not as polished and it's not really as fake. And I think TikTok also, changed that landscape too. So like things are just a little less, performative.
Yeah.
I would say.
No, I started my Substack in September.
Yeah.
I moved everything off my... Oh, thank you. Yeah, I moved everything of mine off MailChimp and moved it straight there because I figured if I was doing weekly mailing, why should I be paying for that when I could have people start following and reading? Because what I've been writing about has been pretty consistent for the past 20 years. So yeah, I might as well just put it out there for people to consume by choice and potentially get paid for it.
Yeah, I have to say I love Substack. I talked to a friend of mine works for venture capitalist firm Andreessen Horowitz, and she actually put me in touch with one of the founders of Substack like 5 years ago. And I was so impressed by it. I actually started my Substack then, and I just didn't start writing it until 3 years ago. But I was like, I love everything about this. People are reading, people are less focused on just like captions and this, as I said, like this performative nature with like Instagram stories and everything.
Yeah.
So it's been great for me. And it's very much a return to old school blogging, which of course I identify with too, and maybe you do too. But yeah, it's been an interesting shift. And listen, like I'm sure in 5 years, there'll be another shift to something else that we don't even know what it is yet. And everything's always changing. It's a game of the floor is lava. But I have to say, like right now, what we're doing, it really resonates with me and I'm into it.
Do you think though, again, speaking about this, because I really want to make sure that people take away like nuggets of, what writers look for in people to cover and also like ideas in terms of developing your brand DNA. I don't think people should sleep on Substack. I think it's an amazing opportunity as a brand owner, even if that's where you're incorporating your weekly journal of what you do as a designer. It's just a way to get followers. It's a way to have your own almost like publication of sorts within others. I think that's something that and it's a pain in the ass, let's be honest, because it's just another medium you have to do. But as long as you're doing something, the SEO of it, they've made it so easy that I always recommend like bring your followers over there and have an opportunity to get your message out. If you ever wanted to start a handbag line and didn't know where to start, this is for you.
Living proof that independent designers can make it big.
Absolutely, Blumenthal is one prime example.
If you had dreams of becoming a handbag designer and didn't know where to start, this is for you. If you have a handbag brand and are in need of strategy and direction, this is for you. I'm Emily Blumenthal, handbag fairy godmother and handbag designer expert, and this is Handbag Designer 101, the masterclass. Over the next 10 classes, I will break down everything you need to know how to make, market, and manufacture a handbag. Broken down for you that you'll not only skip steps in that handbag building process, but also save money in that learning curve. For the past 20 years, I've been teaching at the top fashion universities in New York City, created the Handbag Awards, and also the Handbag Designer 101 podcast.
podcast. I'm going to show you like I have countless brands from sketch to sample to shelf, whether you're just starting out and don't know where to begin, or even if you have a handbag line and just need some strategic direction, the Handbag Designer 101 Masterclass is just for you. So let's get started, and you will be the creator of the next it bag. Join me, Emily Blumenthal, with the Handbag Designer 101 Masterclass.
I totally agree. And, I've gotten a lot of new subscribers from within Substack, from the app, from, Notes, which is kind of like a Twitter competitor. So yeah, it's its own sort of ecosystem, and, it's been good for me. But I do think, it's sort of at the nascent stages. Like, I don't know that every consumer is aware of what it is. And it's, it's like sort of, but it's on the up, podcasting is also like another place where people can go, obviously, this is a meta conversation, but yeah, it's one more thing. I mean, yeah, you're doing a million things. We're all doing a million things, but, choose the one that works for you and is the medium that really lights you up, whether that's Instagram, a podcast, a Substack, whatever it is. But there are great people, on all of these platforms. And, you just have to do the one that bolts you out of bed and you have a lot to say on.
Do you find, though, now I'd love to kind of move the conversation to what you look for in people to cover and what are the touch points that you want them to have. So I'm sure you've reached out, as we all have, at least on this end, because I go on both sides, reaching out to brands and having brands reach out to me to be covered. And there's so much misinformation about what is needed to be somebody that's worthy of consideration. If you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Sure. So I'm actually happy to see, I think there's so many AI articles, some of them, like, they don't even have real people writing them. They've made up, like, I forget which publication it was, but they made up like a fake journalist. Like, there's a lot of crap, frankly, online. And, for a while, it seemed like publications just wanted things to be written for, robots to be reading it, i.e. like just SEO'd out, and it didn't sound like a human wrote it, and it just wasn't fun to read. And that was sort of the game plan for a while. And I think we're moving away from that. I think that, these publications are losing readers because, just reading something that's very, highly SEO and not written like a real person wrote it, it's not appealing. No one's going to read it.
Don't you agree? And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but like the expectation of people like you tied to publications and the need to pump out content at unrealistic, unhuman speed, because they just, and so much of that I have found wasn't proofread, wasn't fact-checked, wasn't like typos, grammar errors, because whomever was writing it was either unqualified or was in too much of a rush to get another set of eyes. And it's like, at this point, I feel like the expectation of readers now has to be higher, or else we have so many options on where we can read.
I totally agree. And, like copy editors and proofreaders, I've worked as a professional copy editor and proofreader. I can tell. I mean, I'm constantly like, as I'm reading things, like horrified, but they've let these people go for budgetary reasons. A lot of the publications have lost, ad dollars, of course. So it is what it is. But, and I've also, e-commerce is a thing, things have to be, as Victoria was saying in your episode earlier, like, things have to be available on major retailers. They have to be affiliate friendly. Unfortunately, they have to be on Amazon. That's not the case for all of, every publication, but that is the case, unfortunately, right now for most publications. So maybe that'll shift again. Maybe people will get tired of only, funneling all these sales to these giant big bucks corporations, I hope. But for the moment, that's just sort of like the milieu we're in. So it's kind of depressing. So I would say, what do I personally look for? Unfortunately for my editorial clients right now, I have to look for things that are available, at a major retailer. That's not to say like 100% of, say I'm writing a handbag story, I might be able to cover like one or two items that are not available at a major retailer. But the other thing is, and I think, this is one of the reasons I love working with Time and AP, they really want expert commentary. Like, I'm somewhat of an expert in fashion and beauty, but they don't actually, they don't want the quotes coming from me with regard to like specific frequently asked questions that they always want to include at the end of the article. So they always want me, to interview, someone in the industry who is like a real expert, which is why I tapped you for that handbag article. And I think that's great because, I know what I know from being a consumer and I know what I know from being a journalist, but like you spoke to things that I absolutely would not know about. And that's, I think, a little bit of a shift. I feel like, the expertise was sort of put on the journalist for a while. think we're moving back to like, we need experts. We need to differentiate this content from the sea of same on the internet. And I think that that's making a difference.
I think all of that's so unique. I think, speaking to what you just said, a lot of the designers with whom I work, I think it's also really important for them to start seeing that USP, this unique selling point, as a point of differentiation. Like, what makes you special, and understanding the landscape, doing a competitive analysis so you're able to speak to who else is doing what you're doing, analyze it. So when someone like you comes to want to cover, that you already know what you're looking for, as opposed to saying, I'm the best thing that's ever happened. You've never seen anything like what I've done, because chances are you've seen it X a million. I think another thing that a lot of people tend to forget is, if you're pitching a writer, or a writer's covering you or has reached out to you, before you respond, look at everything they've written before.
That's great advice. Yes. Yeah, just like a little bit of personalization, I think, goes a long way. I understand it's, I can't even imagine how intimidating and just like what a Sisyphean task it is to, look up every single person you're pitching, but it's worth it. Even if you just look at their Instagram, even if you look at their, for writers, their muck rack, just to get an idea of like the last 2 or 3 things they wrote, what kinds of things they cover, it really makes a difference.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things, though, that are you, as someone, when you're looking to cover, like, what if you found like the best designer product, independent handbag product, independent product, and yet they are not on Amazon, they don't have an affiliate link to a major retailer? Are they able to get an affiliate link through a major retailer if they're not sold on that platform? Like, what are some recommendations you can suggest for someone to get coverage? Because it gets harder and harder. It's like, how do you look up a word if you don't know how to spell it? Like, how am I supposed to get on a platform if I shouldn't?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, I think independent sellers can sell on Amazon. So I think you can get on Amazon in a multitude of ways. So that's something to explore, and that would, take care of the problem. There's also skim links. I forget what some of the other, there's ShopMy. There's actually a new affiliate network called Flagship that I just found out about. That's a lot of smaller brands that influencers are working with, not necessarily like editorial publications, but that might be a good route, because, it's all about indie brands, smaller brands on Flagship. So that's one option. ShopMy is another option. Again, like, these tend to service content creators and influencers, but I think that that's a way in the door. But I would reach out to, I would see what I could do to get my product sold on Amazon. Look into skim links. I'm not sure exactly how that process works. And then, ShopMy, Flagship. And then there's also Like to Know It, LTK, or whatever. That's another one. There's so many of these, but I would try all of those. But as I said, it's not like it's out of the question that I could cover someone who is not available, that, someone who doesn't sell on these major platforms, but they might be, one of many products I'm covering in a roundup, and maybe I can sort of like fudge them in there. But, every publication's different. But for the ones I write for, I can usually, get 1 or 2 products in that are not affiliate friendly.
I would say for the most part now, it's kind of like, from the press requests I've seen, at the very bottom, it says affiliate links needed, must have. And I think that's something that a lot of smaller brands need to realize, that have it available just for editorial, have it available just as an opportunity and marketing link. It's not something you need to publicize, but just have it so it exists.
I agree.
Yeah, because editorial at the end of the day is supposed to lead to sales. So
right. The thing is that, as I said, they're not relying on advertising anymore. They're only relying on this. These, e-commerce links are keeping them afloat. It is what it is. You can like it or dislike it, but that's just sort of the nature of the beast right now. So I agree with you. It's, it's not ideal, but if you want to be considered, that unfortunately is just a thing you have to do right now. Maybe that'll change, but for the moment, that's the case.
That's wild that these publications can't depend on advertising anymore. I mean, it's just crazy. Those big events that we'd go to, the upfronts, the whole thing, brand sponsored activities.
I think the majority of the budget goes to Google, Facebook, and influencers. And then whatever's left goes to these, legacy publications. But, that's just sort of what's happened.
So I just want to speak a little bit about how you receive what you should cover. And is a lot of it ideas that you've come up with, or is it typically what's handed to you? Because I know a lot of designers, when they're looking at people to cover them, they'll reach out and saying, I'm sorry, I only do what's handed over. Like, how does it work with people like you?
So for me, I actually go about it in a few ways. So I will, let's say I get a handbag assignment, the best tote bags, whatever it is. I will usually, do some research. I'll look online. I'm a shopper. I'm buying handbags too. So I'm thinking about, whatever I last purchased that I happen to like. And then I kind of cast a wide net. Like I go on Quoted, 𝐸𝐸𝐺, and I get a lot of things sourced through that. So a lot of publicists are on there and they'll pitch me. I find a lot of experts on there to interview. So that's one avenue. I'm in a giant Facebook group of publicists. It's called PR czars. So that's another thing I do once I get an assignment. And then
I'm part of that too.
You are too. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get a lot of everything from small brands to, very corporate, larger brands that way. And then, I have an Instagram following, so I'll usually put something on an Instagram story too. So anyone who follows me there will, reach out. And, I always tell people, like friends of mine, if you have a handbag, that you really like, let me know about it. So I sort of approach it that way and then go from there.
Do you ever come up with your own ideas and say, here's a story I'd like to do and then pitch it out? Or do you typically wait for someone to come to you with a story because it's paid for?
I do pitch things, but I think I've noticed just in the last several years, it tends to just be more assignments. Like I think the publications just sort of like know exactly what they're looking for. It's a lot of times it's based on SEO, really like frequently asked questions that people are just asking on Google. It's just sort of the nature of the beast right now. So I certainly can pitch things. I do pitch things, but I would say the majority of my fashion and beauty articles anyway, of those assignments tend to be assigned. I also write for the Seattle Times about like home decor, and that is actually all pitching. So, and they don't want any e-commerce, weirdly. Like they don't even want me to mention products at all. So it's a mixed bag, It's bizarre, but it just depends on the publication.
Just to wrap up, how have you seen the trends in terms of stories that have come to you? I mean, I know, like, regardless of when this episode runs, like, for example, right now, everything is so election focused. So is it like, the top 10 products to wear that show your political pride or something like that? Do you find like that the stories that have shifted in terms of what's pitched to you to write?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a timely angle. I mean, because I write a lot of shopping content, it tends to be like, I have a lot of Black Friday assignments right now. I have one for furniture, the best, furniture sales for Black Friday. The best Dyson hairdryer sales is another assignment I have right now, but it runs the gamut. I mean, I get like, fashion, beauty, home, all of that. So I would say it is definitely timely, but because I'm mostly writing, e-commerce stuff, it tends to be around like Prime Day, Black Friday, Labor Day sales. There's a lot of that in terms of like timeliness, but the rest of it is pretty evergreen though. I'll do like, Time has me doing a lot of like single product reviews. They tend to be more like furniture items or like a perfume or, something specific. I guess it could be like a handbag too. And I'm always pitching, sort of one-offs like that. And, but I'd say like every, maybe I'll pitch 15 of those and one will get assigned.
Can I just ask you, just as a final question, let's just say you're doing a story on handbags, just for conversation's sake. What do you need the designer to have to send to you beyond just the link, just beyond an affiliate link?
I would say I need like not, I feel like the days of press releases are over, but I would need like just like a paragraph about it, an image. I obviously need to see it. They don't need to send a sample. That's kind of, that used to be the case. It's not the case anymore. No one's really doing original photography. So yeah, for me, I would say, a small write-up, what makes it different, and an image, where I can buy it, how much it is. And that's basically it.
And the image should be on a clean white background, just to be clear.
Yes. Yeah, that is helpful. Yes.
Yeah, because it's not like you're going to reshoot anything. And I think that assumption is long gone of send it in, we're going to review it, we're going to shoot it, we're going to do a lifestyle shoot. Like those are gone. Unless it's a Vogue, it's not happening.
Yeah. And if you have the budget of Vogue. But yeah, the budget is just simply not there for these publications in, 2024.
Oh my God. Anyway, it's just so true how things have evolved. But, what I always tell people, because I deal with retailers all the time, and the big box retailers, and a lot of them are pretty doom and gloom, like, oh, nobody's shopping. And it's just, everybody's shopping. Everybody's just shopping differently. And I think, we had a glut of sameness for so long, and then followed by COVID, where there was a backlog that I think all of us collectively are just hungry for something new and shiny and something that's going to bring joy. And it has to fall into two categories. Either it's luxury that's already been approved, meaning like it's established. I think it's very hard to get somebody to invest in a very expensive product if there's no backstory behind it or it's been around, or it's within an affordable price point that theoretically justifies the investment.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, Amber, you have been phenomenal. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. How can people find you, follow you, and catch some of your amazing stories?
Well, thank you for having me on. It was a delight to speak to you. People can find me on Substack. It's amber.substack.com. The Substack is called Things I Buy as a Civilian. I'm also on Instagram. My Instagram name is the name of my old blog. I should really change that, but I haven't. It's rouge, ROUGE, or _18, like the number 18. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's those two places these days that I'm all over.
Oh my God. Amber Katz, thank you for joining us on Handbag Designer 101.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and review and follow us on every single platform at Handbag Designer. Thanks so much. See you next time.